Labor government was in power.
Call the Honourable Damien O'Connor.
Speaker, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you very much. It's a shame that member over there doesn't show a bit more leadership in agriculture. Everyone might be a little bit better off. Mr. Speaker, I was in this House in the 1990s and I sat through two bills. One was the Crown Pastoral Lands Bill, 98 it was passed. The other was the Maori Reserve Lands Bill, passed in 1997. The second bill righted an injustice that was occurring in the country where the owners of the land, Maori, were unable to extract from the people leasing their land a fair rental. In fact, they were locked into a situation of 21-year rents, perpetual right of renewal, and lessees on that land paying over time, while adjustments were made every 21 years, paying over time a nominal fee for the rental of their land, be it commercial, be it rural, or be it residential. And the national government rectified that situation, and good on them. They said it was completely unfair, unjust and immoral that the owners of the land could not extract a rightful rental. It was established in law that the Maori owners were entitled to 5.5% of the unimproved land value of that land on an annual basis, being a fair return. What we're doing here today is challenging that precedent once again, and in fact putting in place bad law. Now, I have a passion for the high country, and I have to say I've been fortunate to have been the guest of a number of high country run holders. I've skied in the areas. I love the place. It is iconic. It is what we portray as New Zealand, the Mackenzie country, Molesworth, right down through Otago. It is magic. We must protect it. And we must protect the people who have endured hardship, who live a long way from civilisation. The cost of living out there is high. They live lonely lives, except that they enjoy them because they make do with their own family. And they are people to be applauded and looked up to. But the reality we were facing and have been facing is that the value of those properties has been going through the roof. Now, the previous minister says that the Crown had to pay a lot of money for a couple of properties, acknowledged. But the value of that land had been driven up primarily by offshore people coming in, seeing... I'm afraid it's true. Initially, there are also New Zealanders who have purchased properties as well, having to pay what is quite a large amount of land, and it's hard to make an economic return on that. I acknowledge that. However, value is in the eye of the beholder. And people have purchased properties because they want somewhere to hide away. They want some of the most majestic scenery in the world on their back door. And who can blame them? The problem was that the value of the land, exclusive of improvements or otherwise, crept up. And the dilemma facing the Crown or the government as the landowner is what sort of rent should be expected from that. Well, in fact, we've got now through a Land Valuation Tribunal ruling, of course, that 2% of the land exclusive of improvements, land valuation exclusive of improvements, is the rightful rental. And that may be fair. It's certainly less than the 5.5% the national government put in place for Maori landowners, which has been accepted. It's a lot less. So the question for a lot of taxpayers is, are we getting a fair return, or is there something funny going on here? But actually, not just that valuation, but in fact now an arbitrary valuation based on a subjective assessment of what is the productive capacity of the land, base productive capacity, exclusive of improvements, and what is the value of the stock, because it's based on the stocking rate, Mr. Speaker. Well, it's a bit like saying how long's a piece of string. very, very hard to establish. And I'm sure that there'll be negotiation and a value arrived at. However, Parliament has the role of passing legislation that is fair. I want to see those families remain on this land. I don't want to see people speculate and make windfall profits, and it's happened in the high country where there has been tenure review, compensation paid, land valued, then flicked off for a huge profit. I think the genuine farming families haven't been easy with that process at all, because they want to remain on the land and farm it properly and protect the environmental values. I absolutely respect their management practice and what they've done over many years. But the problem if you pass a piece of legislation that is inherently unfair is that somewhere down the track another government will rectify the problem. And they'll do so with moral authority, Mr. Speaker, because they will point out the unfairness of this, be it to the taxpayer or to any other party. And we have, and I went to a meeting and put the Labor government's proposal on the table, is that we would sit down, provide the right incentives for farmers who were managing the land properly and ensure that they had affordable rents. But the establishment of the base value of the land and the base rental had to be one consistent with most other commercial entities across the country. It must be. Otherwise there'll be a stream of people knocking on our doors asking that they want to be like the other crew who might be getting a concession at 2% or at 3% or whatever, when some people on fixed incomes are being forced from their homes because Maori landowners want 5.5% return on the valuation of a block of land in Motueka, and those people can't afford to pay it. People have been forced from their homes. Now, there was talk, and the Minister said, that families were going to be forced off the high country. That is not what we want. In fact, the whole concept of income-based rentals was developed by Labor for Housing New Zealand tenants. And what did the National Party say about that? Outrageous! What sort of hypocrisy did we see in this House when we suggested and implemented income-based rentals for Housing New Zealand tenants? Oh no, that wasn't right, they said, because they'd been through the process of trying to sell off Housing New Zealand properties and make it hard for those people to remain in their homes. And now we have a national government implementing a law that says for high country lessees we should have income-based rentals. Now, I'm not absolutely opposed to that, but we need to establish a fair system of how we do that. We should provide financial incentives, as the Parliamentary Commissioner for the Environment said, for people farming the land properly and upholding and sustaining the environmental and intrinsic values of that high country, because it is spectacular. And we must maintain those. And the farmers on most of those stations and properties have the knowledge and the experience to do that. We want to see them stay there. But they must deep down know that if they think they're getting a good deal now, someone in the future is going to knock on the door and say, we've got to make this fair, guys and girls, because the taxpayer's actually losing out here. Or can we sit down and work out another way of ensuring the taxpayer gets fair value? And the value could be in the protection of the values. We said that to them. It could be an enhancement of the environmental values, and there should be a value put on that, and we should acknowledge what those good farmers are doing. But unfortunately, what we have here is a piece of legislation that is inherently unfair and unjust, because it's unjust to the owners of the land, and that's the taxpayers of this country, because it's an arbitrary assessment of what is productive carrying capacity, it's an arbitrary assessment of what is stock value, and so ultimately the final figure will be one established by negotiation, but it may, in hindsight, not be considered fair. And so I want to support the high country families and having a truly sustainable regime that is both affordable...
Sorry to interrupt the honourable member. His time has expired. I call Eugenie Sage